consistent from what we've seen so far. And now, with the lower finals, both teams facing elimination, the prize pool is only going up from here by a substantial margin for both of these teams, and they want to take the lion's share. So let's see what each of them has in store as Perplexed and Golden Guardians square off right now in game number 1 here in Theater.
All right, so I'm interested to see if there's any difference in comps, because I think basically every single team has had a different comp over the course of the whole entire weekend for this dungeon. Whether or not, I think we saw some Windwalker DK play, we saw some Moonkins coming out of the Chinese teams, and again a difference in composition. Perplexed running that MM Hunter Fire Mage Windwalker Monk, where Golden Guardians running that Windwalker Monk Elemental Shaman.
Yeah, a little bit of a difference here. This Hunter has been something that has been run historically in the dungeon quite frequently. This is a pretty common marksmanship Hunter dungeon. That Wild Spirits Burst provides so much utility in here as well. Such great timing lineups on so many great 4 or 5 target pulls. But the Elemental Shaman has been a new adaptation as well. They also do really well at that target range, and they provide a bunch of extra off healing. Just look at the healing meters right now. Lip in second place right now with 5,000 HPS being contributed on this pull. I mean, that is a huge amount of extra value that you are bringing in that slot. It creates so much more safety for your team, for your tank, for your healer to do damage.
Yeah, look at how much damage JB is doing relative to Ryzen, and that's because the Elemental Shaman allows JB to have a lot more free globals, like you were saying, and being able to focus them into doing just more damage, because he knows that Lip is going to be carrying the brunt of the ability to be able to top up people with that Ancestral Guidance. And Perplexed and Golden Guardians, neck and neck, killing the first boss within a few seconds of one another.
Yeah, it looks like Golden Guardians actually had one of the boss mobs teleport out there, not quite as efficient cleave onto all 3 targets, and that's going to mean that their boss goes down a solid 7 seconds after Perplexed. So the early lead here going to Perplexed, despite the first boss looking quite nice, particularly on the opener for the Guardians. But yeah, like you said, the Guardians pulled a bunch of extra trash into that boss that Perplexed didn't. Perplexed only got the 1 mounted mob, whereas the Golden Guardians have pulled all the trash that was up there into that boss. This has a couple of ramifications for the Golden Guardians. The big thing I think it means is that they're not going to be able to trigger their 100% pride after the last boss, whereas Perplexed can do that because they've left some trash up there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that Golden Guardians probably still has 1 or 2 mobs up there, but I don't. Oh man, where would they even leave that 1 or 2 mobs? Yeah, I think you have to be right. I think they have to have pulled everything.
You might be right. There might be 1 mob left up there for that final bit of count for Golden Guardians. We'll have to investigate once they do get back up there. But it's certainly a difference, but a bigger difference. Goes down. Ryzen down in such a healing-intensive moment as well. There are still so many shackled souls out there and so many storming tornadoes. It's going to be Swag going down as well. They don't have an instant cast battle res here. Perplexed are going to limp over the finish line there, killing everybody off, or killing off the Portal Guardian before its Soulstorm finishes the rest of the group. But that's going to be a battle res on Ryzen. That takes time and consumes their battle res resource. And then Ryzen has to cast this slow out-of-combat res as well.
I mean, that is just one of the biggest issues with how Inspiring works in this dungeon. All those shackled souls were just kind of coming in a little bit slow. They had a nice binding shot that was available to be able to get some of them rooted, but they started hitting the group just a little bit early, and once that Soulstorm came out, Bryson goes down, then Swag dies just quickly following it. Very unfortunate situation for Perplexed, but for Golden Guardians fans, you have to be super happy with this. Now they get a pair and a nice Ring of Peace onto that Soul Shaper mob that has that Inspiring on it. Now they're just going to kick that Soulbinder in, make sure that they do get all of the kicks required on it, and they're looking really solid for the side of Golden Guardians. They're getting their 20% pride here spawned.
Yeah, Perplexed trying to do the same thing over here, but they have lost several seconds as a result of that fiasco, and that safety net of that battle res is down for them as well. That is a huge thing. That means the next mistake could end the run for Perplexed against Golden Guardians here. One thing that I think is cool as well is Golden Guardians with this Elemental Shaman, it actually does have quite a bit of useful effect against the Inspiring affix. You have the ability, if there's only 1 important interrupt, you can just Thunderstorm and kick. You Thunderstorm away the Inspiring mob, kick whatever thing was important, the Inspiring mob runs back in, and as long as there's not too many important things that you need to use that against, that can be the one little lifeline you need to potentially make an otherwise impossible Inspiring pull happen.
Dratnus, something that I completely forgot that Perplexed does, because we haven't seen it this whole entire season, is they actually don't lust the first pull of the dungeon. Instead, their first lust of the dungeon is on Kultharak, which basically no other team has done. I completely forgot that that was even a difference that we should be watching out for. But yeah, Perplexed is going to be able to gain back some time with that use of Bloodlust later on.
Yeah, the thing is, this dungeon usually goes right around that 20-minute mark, a little bit under.
Yep.
Which means that as long as you fire off this first lust, you know, sometime before that, like, 8-minute mark, you're definitely going to get another full lust in this dungeon. And there's no way to just hit lust 3 times, right? The dungeon would need to go to, like, 21 minutes before you're starting to have that be a realistic possibility. So it's the kind of thing that, you know, if you can find a way to make that save time, it can absolutely be worthwhile, but it's not like other teams haven't considered it, right? Perplexed is the only team so far that has a strat where they think that is faster. We'll see whether or not that's the case. Right now, we know that not even paying attention to strat differences, Perplexed is behind in the execution front. So
exactly.
If their strat is better, they might be able to claw that back. But even if the two strats are the exact same speed, Perplexed would be behind at this point.
Yeah, so Golden Guardians here, interestingly enough, dropped their Ashen Hollow on top of this pack. Really good multi-use of that Ashen. JB is able to just cleave down a bunch of those trash mobs, and then it's taken straight into the Pride so that they don't have to commit any more cooldowns to that. Prideful is just the Ashen. JB will just end up carrying that pack and that Pride, and it allows them to save their cooldowns for the damage dealt increased buff that you're going to be getting from that Kultharak with amped up with that Prideful buff. So this is really good for the Golden Guardians to make sure that they were able to save that Prideful buff. And they were able to save a lot of their cooldowns by using that Ashen Hollow. Perplexed here have spawned their 40% Pride. They all have taken that portal in tandem. They are looking to pull that Prideful into the boss. That's how they're going to use their Bloodlust, just a little bit different. Wolf Disco unfortunately getting stunned there. The Pride will evade and then teleport to them momentarily, but it does take a moment to get there. It will have a lot of stacks, so kind of scary, but not something that can't be outdone.
Yeah, that is the power of the Bloodlust cooldown. It really does make some things possible that otherwise wouldn't be. And you can see they're holding on to it for a second there.
Ooh.
And now out comes the Ashen Hallow. Out comes the Bloodlust. Where is that Pride?
Where's the Pride?
Going to teleport. Maybe they found a way to actually skip it entirely rather than have it teleport. Maybe they hit their invis pots before they clicked on the portal or something. Or maybe it's still on the way at some point in the future. But if they have found a way to make that Pride skip happen, this could be a big time save for Perplexed. And you can see with that Lust, they are melting this boss. They are catching up to where Golden Guardians are. They're within 10% now of the boss's HP. They're catching up on count as well. And yeah, that Pride does not appear to be anywhere to be found, so it is not going to come in on this boss.
I'm so surprised because they were definitely in combat with it. You saw Wolf Disco get stunned by the Pride lines even.
Yeah.
So they must have found a way to be able to drop the combat with it. I'm not entirely sure how they would have been able to do that, but hey, Perplexed coming in with new innovative strategies. Even in our grand finals, this is our grand final weekend. This is looking really great for them.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. They have the boss now at a lower percentage of health, and they're going to be getting out of this wing a little bit ahead of where the Golden Guardians are. Now, that does have two important caveats. Caveat number one, they are behind a little bit in trash count. And caveat number two, they're behind 10 seconds of death differential. So when you factor those two things in, this is a dead even race, or maybe even still slightly favored by the Golden Guardians. But it cannot be understated just how strong that Prideful skip is when it works. You know, every time you're skipping a Pride, you save so much time, an entire big health mini boss that you don't have to kill. And yeah, you miss out on that Prideful buff, but it is not comparable to the amount of time it takes to kill the Pride.
Yep, and now Perplexed here getting one of those champions pulled. We do know that after they get these ossified conscripts down from just something that we saw over the course of the weekend, they do end up pulling two of those champions together, which is an incredibly dangerous pull for Divine. So watching his health is really important. On the other side, Golden Guardians going a completely different route than what we see for Perplexed. Golden Guardians is going to that Gorechop wing, where Perplexed is going to the Zav wing. Golden Guardians here, what they're looking to do is they're looking to make sure that they get all the kicks on the Sludge Spears. Any casts that go off from the Sludge Spears can be dangerous. It can cost you 20% damage dealt decreased, 20% healing done decreased. And so they need to make sure that they are getting kicks on every single one of the Sludge Spears, as that cast can be really dangerous.
Lip fires off the Thunderstorm to send those mobs right back where they came from into the middle of the pull. One cast will almost go off there right at the end, but they have done a great job of getting everything managed, and that is a huge strength of the Elemental Shaman. The 12-second interrupt of Wind Shear versus the 24 seconds that most ranged DPS players have to contend with means you're actually much better at keeping something like that locked down the entire way through. And not to mention the control effects like the Thunderstorm that was put to great use there. And that Shaman is a great source of the Necrolord Covenant. Golden Guardians get to play Kyrian on their Demon Hunter, which most Demon Hunters prefer, with the exception of Divine, who is on the side of Perplexed.
I don't think Divine's upset.
He actually prefers that He's playing it in all kinds of different dungeons, even when there's no Necrolord Covenant requirement like Theater of Pain has. So, that's not necessarily a cost from Perplexed perspective, but it is a benefit from the Golden Guardian side that they get that beautiful free Necrolord Covenant with the Elemental Shaman.
So Shine, from the side of Perplexed, has trapped that patrolling captain, and they are finishing off their last mini-boss that they need to spawn their 60% Pride. On the opposite side, Golden Guardians have already spawned their 60% Pride, very notably in different parts of the dungeon, so it's hard to compare one-to-one what is actually going on. Golden Guardians have probably their hardest pull of the dungeon here up ahead after they end up killing off this Pride. It will be like a really big gas bag pull. But they do have the Prideful buff available for it. They're going to make sure that they have all of their offensive CDs. Lip is probably going to pop his AG there to be able to top people up. This is one of the biggest moments for Golden Guardians, so making sure that they do this cleanly is incredibly important. And Inspiring is going to make sure that some kicks can potentially go through, like with the Withering Discharge that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, watch out for the use of the utility effects like Ring of Peace and like Thunderstorm to manage those sorts of, AoE kind of brief interrupt moments here. Looks like Golden Guardians, though, are just deploying so much damage here with Fired Up. He has pressed his buttons here. He's doing 50,000 DPS here on the pull. Everything is dead already. And they actually CC'd that Inspiring mob up at the top there so they wouldn't have to deal with it, making everything else immune to CC. Yeah. Making this pull a lot safer means they don't have to rely on any shenanigans to get those kicks. And they'll be taking these last two guards directly into Gorechop. So this is their third boss in the dungeon they are getting started on. Perplexed making their way towards their third boss, which is going to be Zav. And it's going to be really tough to directly compare these two teams on the timer because they have chosen these different paths. But I mean, the two wings do take pretty similar amounts of time. We'll really have to wait and see, though, until they kill their next bosses, how things have stacked up and who has gained the time in this section.
Yeah, it's typically, at least on live keys, this Zav wing takes more often than not a lot more time than that Gorechop wing. However, this is the MDI, and these teams are going as fast as possible, and things that are applicable to live keys aren't always applicable to MDI style stuff. But what's something that is super interesting that you see a lot on live now, with at least the highest key groups, is that they're not even killing that banner. And you can see for Perplexed, they're just leaving that banner up. Of course, that's going to apply a slow to the whole entire group, but everybody basically has some ability or some way of being able to dodge Zav's abilities, whether that be through Freedom, whether that be through just Infernal Strike Leap, whatever else everybody has. They need to make sure that they are dodging these Zav frontals and abilities during this combo right here. So you see that Shine jumps out of the way of that massive cleave. Now the Deafening Crash comes out. Maybe immunities have to be used if you are not in a great spot, but everybody from Perplexed is able to pull that off seamlessly.
Yeah, it's a really great decision there to not really focus damage into those banners. You know, they'll get some incidental cleave, but you're mostly just focusing on the boss and you're saying, look, it's bad to be slowed by 90% or whatever it is, but it is much worse to give the boss effectively a huge health shield if you decide to focus. I mean, that's what would happen. Oh no! Ryson takes the wrong turn there.
No, that's intentional.
That's
intentional
okay,
because of the Shadow Meld. Yeah, because of the Shadow Meld of the Captain. So everybody's going to be group melding or feign deathing or whatever. Ryson has to die because he's in combat with that Captain, and they don't need the count from it. I didn't realize. I was like, why did he just jump into that? But that makes a lot more sense.
That is so cool. That's such a great decision there to have that adaptation to the path. And yeah, 4 Night Elves in the group. Of course, Paladins can't play Night Elf, so dying and dropping combat with the mob, that Inspiring Captain mob that is such a pain to deal with. And then everybody else just hits their meld button and problem solved. So, I mean, yeah, incredible strategy there by Perplexed. Really well timed by Ryson as well. Died right at the very end of the boss fight. It did look like it was not intentional there for a sec, but of course, player of Ryson's caliber not going to run into the damage when it was unintended. And they are now working into their Gorechop wing, whereas the Golden Guardians are working on their first mini-boss of the Zav wing. So both teams now taking the second of the 2 wings that the other team has already dealt with.
Yeah, Count looking very even going into their respective wings that they have to deal with. Also, Boss 3 split timing, almost the exact same. So maybe we're just wrong and Zav wing isn't that much longer. But if it is, then Perplexed is looking in a pretty good shape here. Although, something important to note, there's a 3-death differential that separates these 2 teams in the favor of Golden Guardians because Perplexed had some problems earlier on.
Oh, look at this. Perplexed have found another Pride skip here. Skipping this Pride out of Gorechop's wing. Now, one thing I'm a little bit concerned about is I think that Pride is going to be fairly close to where they'll exit Gorechop's wing later. So maybe they
right at the entrance.
Maybe what they'll do is they'll pull it and fight it while they're waiting for that Mordretha RFP. We've seen teams do that with a Pride near the front of the Zav wing in the past as well. So maybe that's the game plan here. But this is a crucial moment, actually for both teams. But on the side of Perplexed, there's so much going on here.
This is really scary for the Golden Guardians, too. The captain that they had parried off to the side, I think got hit by Ashen Hollow. I'm not 100% sure. So they had to, panic ring it away. They look like they're just, CCing it with Hodge and whatnot. And they're not able to actually get a recrowd control on it.
Repentance. Repentance has come out from
now?
JB.
Okay.
Yeah, so they do have a permanent effective crowd control on it, but that cost them a lot of globals over the course of this pull. However, they've taken down those conscripts now, and they have got it once again secured in crowd control. They should be okay, and I expect that they will eventually be dropping combat with it as well, although it's worth noting, they only have 2 Night Elves on their team. If they want to drop combat with that thing through death, it will be much more costly. So actually, the odds I'd say are fairly good that they will kill it at some point. It's hard to say when exactly they would do that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they do something similar to Perplex where they just have multiple people die, but that seems really bad too. I think that there's definitely a pretty large cost of dropping combat with that thing, after you have more than one person die, because you are losing the 5-second penalty. Okay, so you'd have to have 2 of them, because Fired Up does have his invis normally, but it's definitely not great. Now the Manifestation of Pride has spawned for the Golden Guardians here.
And look at the percent. This is their 100% Pride. So I promise you they are not planning to kill any more trash at this point. There's no way they are going to kill that thing. Maybe they'll just keep it CC'd forever. Maybe that's going to be the game plan here. Because what I expect they'll do, I mean, there's no way they're going to kill that mini-boss that's ahead of them either. They will be skipping directly to Zav and trying to nuke it down just as quickly as humanly possible because they do not have that much time left. Perplexed are already nearly done with Gorechop here. And once Perplexed finish this off, I mean, they have a little bit more trash that they need, whereas Golden Guardians all done with their trash. But then they'll be right onto Mordretha, and the dungeon will be over. So Golden Guardians, 2 bosses now that they need to get done here really, really quickly.
Yeah, Perplexed feels about 35 seconds ahead of where Golden Guardians is. And at least for their Gorechop split, they're going to be right about 30 seconds ahead of where Perplexed is going to be about 30 seconds ahead of where Golden Guardians' Gorechop split was. And Golden Guardians, having those issues with that captain, have cost them a little bit of time pulling Zav, and that's actually going to cost them a decent amount of time just overall. They do have Bloodlust, so Zav should be falling really quickly, and they have to deal with far fewer banners. But Perplexed, already down Gorechop. They do just have to deal with that 1 Pride before they end up going up towards Mordretha, and then a little bit of count that they have to deal with, but that count is really easily obtained with the boss.
Golden Guardians actually doesn't have Bloodlust for this. They fired off their Bloodlust roughly on cooldown here, which means they would maybe get a 3rd one, but I don't think there's going to be enough time left in the dungeon for that even, whereas Perplexed still has a Bloodlust in their future, and that is going to be a big benefit for them as well. They are working now on that skipped 80% Pride that was near the start of the Gorechop wing. They are killing it as they are making their way over towards the teleporter up to Mordretha, and I didn't quite catch it, but I expect that somebody went up already and started that RP, and then came back down, so that once they get upstairs, Mordretha will be right there, ready for them to kill, and all that's left in the dungeon for Perplexed is Mordretha with a Pride buff, and then some trash afterwards or at the end of that. And you see, they teleport up there, and Mordretha already pullable, no RP to wait for. Golden Guardians, they are now heading over as well, but you can see JP still has that slow from that last banner, and they have to actually do this Pride and then Mordretha also. So Perplexed hugely in the lead right now because they have this Pride buff already, and they'll get to pop their Lust soon. There it is, the Time Warp Orb coming out. All of their cooldowns will fit into this as well, I believe. They were waiting a little bit on that Lust push so that their Wings and their Ashen Hallow would be back just in time to not miss out on any of the Bloodlust, and they are just pumping as much damage as they can into Mordretha. And once Mordretha dies, they do need to get that trash pulled, and so you can see the trash getting into combat with them right now. All of it is coming towards them, and they can now cleave onto all
here's
these
everything.
things. Yeah, they want to make sure they don't kill all this trash too soon. If it dies too much ahead of schedule, oh no, Swag goes down. Swag under pressure here and does die for Perplexed. They have an Inspiring Aura here, which means they can't CC any of these mobs. And once these mobs die, they will spawn their Pride. They need to finish Mordretha here. It looks like the call has been made.
They're killing the trash, Stratos.
Yeah, they're not gonna get the res out on Swag either because they don't have an instant cast battle res. So they just need to kill Mordretha here. That Pride is going to be ignored, but it does represent a lot of damage coming out on the group here. Mordretha at 5%
Here's
health.
some more of those
they
circles.
need to get it killed. Oh, look at their health. They're in so much trouble here.
Oh my gosh, this is so scary. Please kill the boss. Please kill the boss right now. Okay, Perplexed is able to down the boss and take the first map.
Wow.
Well, not quite yet, actually. I mean, if you look at the timer here, there's still another 10 seconds left. If Golden Guardians can maybe squeeze out a tiny bit of damage, they could potentially still have this, but 30% boss HP is not going to be enough, no. Perplexed does have this, even with those 4 deaths on the board. Very close game, though. Oh, my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
Man, that was that looked a lot closer than it needed to be at that point. There's Zyro. Perplexed takes that victory, but Theater can just be absolutely brutal for these guys.
Yeah, Senior Wolf takes first blood in the Battle of the Seniors here, and man, like, I feel like, Golden Guardians played their comp to perfection, but just the superior routing and strategy coming out from Perplexed really won this dungeon here, even with those weird spot deaths everywhere. Now, of course, man, the end there, that was a little scary with Swag going down. I mean, one more death there, maybe one more rot death, and maybe Golden Guardian's going to come back into it. And of course, you have to remember Ashine died after the key was already over, so you're not going to get any extra 5 seconds on the board. But to be fair, it wouldn't have made a difference anyway, as Perplexed ends up taking that game by 24 seconds. I mean, it was definitely a close one, and the damage numbers across the board, they show that too. And I think, looking at the damage values here, I'm kind of surprised to see the Hunter topping damage for Perplexed.
What do you think about that one, Dranos?
Yeah, I mean, Hunter is a spec that does pump out pretty fantastic damage if it gets those good wild spirits. And I think that's the key about this dungeon. This dungeon works out so nicely for those 2-minute specs. And that is a huge, huge thing that the Hunter is doing really well. And you can see it also in the Windwalker damage too. Windwalker putting out a tremendous amount of DPS in the dungeon also. They're actually kind of eclipsing the Mage on the side of Perplexed, whereas on the side of Golden Guardians, Fired Up still doing the brunt of the heavy lifting there as usual. Fired Up always finding a way to just do so much damage on that Mage spec. I'm impressed here by the 0 deaths as well from Golden Guardians, even though they lost this map. I mean, that kind of cleanliness and consistency of gameplay, even though they're the team that just had a series, whereas Perplexed had a little bit of a break coming into this match. I think that speaks well to their state here, but Perplexed, yeah, definitely a superior strategy that won them the day there.
Yeah, no question on that one. And that's also going to start setting, our sights towards the future, because DOS and then Spires, of course, are some of the upcoming dungeons that have to be dealt with. But, we talked a lot of times as well, Titles, about some of the more painful dungeons, some of the dungeons that can kind of gum up a lot of the teams. And Theater has just been one of those where, it's a lot longer of a dungeon. It also just very frequently has a lot of these extra deaths. So the fact that, we're expecting whoever goes forward to immediately have to play Echo right after the fact, it's speaking very well that the deaths are getting reduced. These catastrophic mistakes we've been seeing pretty regularly in the cup play has actually been getting cleaned up a lot.
Yeah, we've seen very few teams just kind of run it down with some of those issues. Like you said, Theater of Pain is definitely one of those dungeons. Necrotic Wake, Plaguefall,
yeah,
definitely all of those dungeons that you just kind of, if you make one mistake, you really just run it down in it, and it's like, I would rather zone out and do this on a 19. Drop it in 2 chest kind of a moment. But yeah, DOS, I mean, we saw Perplexed have some major issues in DOS versus Golden Guardians earlier in the cup, or earlier this weekend. They wiped that Pride skip multiple times, and that was really bad for them. So making sure that they can shore up those weaknesses is super important, because I actually think that going into that Pride skip, they were slightly ahead. So I think that their strategy may be just a little bit faster if they can pull it off.
Well, that's a good question, and we should bring it on over to our senior analysis, Ironic here, to break it down for us.
Well, I'm not personally a member of the seniors, but I'll do my best to act as one here while we go over these replays here. Looking at the start of the dungeon here, I really thought that the Ellie Shaman pick was going to make the difference here. This is where we first saw Perplexed have a couple deaths, and you can see how it was so easy for Golden Guardians, being completely carried by the AoE healing that Ancestral Guidance brings on that pulse. Nobody was ever in danger of dying there. But, of course, Perplexed brought it back with this ridiculous double mini-boss pull. It can't be overstated how difficult that is, especially on the tank. And if you have any of those overlapping AoE of damage abilities go off at the same time, you'll actually just get one shot. So going for those risky plays actually gave Perplexed enough of an advantage, even with the 4 or 5 deaths on the board that they could have gotten there, to take the dungeon outright. Now, I think the one thing that I really couldn't get a good clip of was the Pride skip before Koltharak. I think kind of all of us are bamboozled as to how that even happened there. So, I mean, that'd be a great strat to have for live, but unfortunately we're just not going to be able to see it again because there's no more Theater of Pain in this tournament.
Yeah, unfortunately. And, Pride skips have been just such a crucial part of, Theater of Pain on live servers as well, like you mentioned, because it is such a tight timer. So, the other side is going to be next up. We got Tyrannical, Bursting, and Explosive onto this one, Tettles. And we've been talking about it. We've been hammering it all weekend. But when it comes to Pride skips, this is the dungeon where teams are just going all in.
Yeah, and one of the Pride skips is really, really annoying. The one that's in the Mechagon wing before Maleficent and Millhouse, you have to drop it within a 5-yard window, and then you have to make sure that you get a Mass Dispel off because you can't Invis Pot with the bursting up, and then you have to make sure that you run far enough away from this Pride, weaving through these narrow corridors to where it doesn't combat you. And that Pride, absolutely brutal. On top of that, some other things that we're probably going to see a lot of dwarves. Being able to dwarf racial off the bursting stacks is super important, and both teams are definitely going to be running a Shadow Priest. If not, they're going to be running the same comp probably, just to make sure that they have access to that Mass Dispel for, again, no more bursting issues.
Yeah, no question onto that one. And, we've been talking about some of the more lethal affixes, and it's always kind of important to note as well, Dratna, some of the changes of this expansion of taking down some affixes, making them a bit more friendly, and most notably in this one, Explosive.
Yeah, Explosive can basically die to any global from basically anybody. Anybody targets it, anybody uses an ability on it, and it will go away. But if they're ignored, they still explode for a lot of damage, and we've seen that actually in this dungeon be a problem. When one of those explosives goes off, when they're not noticed by anybody in your group, when they happen, far behind you, far away from you, or when you just have, if everybody's in their damage cooldowns, one thing about DPS players is when they're in their damage cooldowns, the explosives just stop rendering on their screen. They stop being able to see them at all, and they're just purely focused on damaging the mobs instead. So if everybody's in their damage cooldowns at the same time, those can really start to overwhelm everybody. So that can be a problem too.
If you're in your mage, if you're a mage in your cooldowns, do not hit an explosive. Even if it's going to hit it. Even if it's going to wipe you, you should let somebody else hit it. It's really bad to target an explosive as a mage during your CDs like that. I feel like
you get to
no, it really isn't.
No,
Fire Blast.
Some Fire Blast.
Are you actually going to change target and Fire Blast those and continue to make sure you have your
you're spamming your flame strikes. Yeah,
that's fair. I guess if you have a mouse over.
Fired Up does. I remember playing with him. He would top damage on explosives. He's kind of crazy.
That guy's insane. That guy is insane.
Absolutely.
Do you think he's going to send the screenshot of the damage meter between him and Wolf Disco later?
He might, actually.
Hello,
I'm sure they are. See, that's what they have to do. That's what you got to get them to do, is ironic, is make sure they take screenshots of explosive damage after this dungeon just to see who's contributing the most to it and see how much they're bullying their healers to get all the explosive orbs as well. Because we know that's going to happen too. I mean, even in the past, Zyro, for Legion MDI, way back when, everybody loved having Paladins on hand because their Crusader Strike was going to deal enough damage to just one-shot them every time.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're way more interested in taking screenshots of their escapades, making fun of, really dumb jokes with the admins of the tournament, so I've seen plenty of those. But yeah, taking a look at Mana Storms here, one of those bosses that just takes a long time to deal with, but is not really all that lethal as long as you're taking care of the mechanics properly, right? And of course, check out the fastest time we've had this tournament so far. Golden Guardians, they're 20 seconds faster than the average.
That's right, and we're not too frequently seeing many deaths on this fight, but very important to note, Tettles, was we almost had a big catastrophe the last time that we saw Golden Guardians playing against the Mana Storms in DOS. They missed the Shadow Fury onto Maleficent, had to get fired up to run his in and everything like that. It caused his death, almost caused more as well. So,
yeah.
Sometimes, this boss seems very scripted and straightforward, but if somebody makes one mistake, it can be catastrophic.
I mean, average deaths is, I guess, relatively high on that boss because, you'll have... it was 0.3, but the average wipes was 0.03. So very infrequently are you going to wipe to the Mana Storms, but one-off deaths to the Shadow Fury, that's not super uncommon just because you do have to be basically topped up and have and have a defensive ready for that to be able to make sure that you live through that.
Also important to mention here, we've seen this matchup previously in the tournament, and this is the one dungeon that Golden Guardians took off of Perplexed. So can they repeat it here and send this to a Game 3? That'd be cool to see.
Very true. The game's getting underway here as Perplexed is up 1 right now. Golden Guardians facing elimination, and they need this one as DOS gets rolling.
Both teams heading over to the left to get started, and this is going to be a nice trash pull here. Let's see whether we have Ashen Hallows coming down from both Paladins, because this is an important decision point that not all Paladins agree on, and it looks like both of them do agree in this case to hold on to it for the next pull, actually. And this means that it'll be a little bit delayed going into the Artificer boss, but you get the benefit of having it on a much more dangerous moment in the very near future. Wow, look how fast Golden Guardians have dealt with all this as well.
Fired Up's taking a picture of that damage meter right now. Just making sure that everybody knows that he is the main character of his team.
Yeah, Fired Up has just done something unbelievable to that pack. Did 60,000 DPS there. Lift's damage meter, you're hard to see off the screen at 20k. That is not a normal thing. Normally 20k is good enough for top damage in these spots, but not when Fired Up is on your team, and that means Golden Guardians are already getting started in this Ardenweald pull, and that extra damage is something that Golden Guardians has just, I've been noticing it from them all weekend, is they just have more damage somehow than everybody else, it seems, and they are getting now into this big trash pull. This is the Ashen Hallow coming out from JP. Ryson presumably about to follow suit here on the side of Perplexed. Here it comes, the Ashen Hallow. All that tea being thrown out to all his friends as well from that Soulbind trade too, giving him a nice little bit of verse. Yeah, nice little benefit there. And look at what Golden Guardians have done to this trash pack as well. Bursting is a bit of a problem there. You can see Dwarf Racials being used there by almost the whole team. Anti-Magic Shell from Lip, negating the need for it entirely. If you anti-magic shell before the bursting gets applied to you, you can stop any number of those stacks. They do not reduce its size at all, so it's only the duration that you have to worry about. 20% count for Golden Guardians, and they are on their pride, but Perplexed have found more trash in this pull. They are up to 24% count, so they've done a bigger pull here. A little bit slower, though.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a little bit slower. I also don't think it's going to translate into any difference in routing. A lot of the count that you're going to get from the Ardenweald area is just static. There's only certain mobs that you really can pull, notably those matriarchs. Don't pull those. Do not pull those. Those are on the do not pull list. But a lot of the mobs that are in this Ardenweald area are pretty easy to pull. I think that basically every group is going to be pulling the exact same thing, so the difference in count here is not really going to be representative. So now Golden Guardians and Perplexed here are gathering up a lot of trash around that Night Fae urn, and they're going to be looking to stun these packs for 10 seconds with that.
Yeah, there is that big AoE stun from the Night Fae player opening that urn, and now they're going to try and get as much damage as they can.
Ooh.
There's that beautiful Sigil of Chains from Yoda, grouping everything nicely up. Divine also here, still on that Necrolord Covenant, it appears, as well. So difference, again, in the Covenant choice between these two Demon Hunters. Look at how much damage Perplexed have been able to yield and to get as well on this pull.
The reason that they were able to get a little bit more damage and just group-wide damage is because they delayed that urn just 10 more seconds than you would traditionally expect it to be used. And by delaying it, it allowed the pack to get just grouped up a little bit tighter, and then the DK cooldowns, and then the flame patch is a little bit better, and then the Mind Seer damage is just a little bit higher amped, because a lot of the damage from these players is within 8 yards of the players. Even though these are two ranged and melee, a lot of their AoE effects are either ground effects or within 8 yards of the target that they're casting it on. So making sure that you have those mobs so tightly packed is very important.
Yeah, one thing to note as well is that by delaying that damage window, you give a Shine time to put his wounds out as well as a DK, and that is something that you have these kind of setup globals, and often if you activate those urns too early, or the Kyrian Spears in Spires of Ascension, you'll be having all of that beautiful free time where you're doing DPS, and it'll all be consumed by the fact that you're forced to do the setup globals in that spot instead of having those like beautiful damage globals instead.
Sure.
So that's what Perplexed were able to do there. There's the Mass Dispel coming out. Actually, no, just a bunch of Dwarf Racials coming out to remove those bursting stacks once again as everything is dying, and they are now on their 40% Pride. Golden Guardians have gotten to this Pride still a little bit ahead of Perplexed, but look at their geographic positioning in the dungeon. Perplexed are right at the lip here, the edge of the boss room, whereas Golden Guardians still need to make their way down there, so that is going to cost them some time, and it means that they'll also have some of that time with a Pride buff spent running rather than fighting a boss, and this Pride is going to die at right around the same time between these two teams. They are neck and neck right now.
Exactly, and I mean that like you said is what would you say, like a 10-second run that they're not even going to mount up for that. This is a run that you actually just pop all of your movement CDs and you just run straight at the boss. Perplexed, get that boss pulled a couple seconds earlier, not even that much earlier, but they did kill the Pride at roughly the exact same time, and now we got a race strat. No team has a significant advantage here, and I think we're going to see Dealer's Ixa die about the same time, but Golden Guardians are actually opening up a little bit of a lead right as I say that.
Yeah, so Golden Guardians, they started the Ardenweld Wing sooner, remember? And that meant that they got to press their cooldown sooner the first time, and that meant they got to Lust on Pull here, whereas Perplexed had to kind of delay this Lust just a tiny bit so that they would have all their cooldowns back up in time. One thing also that is speeding up, one thing that's speeding up Golden Guardians a little bit as well is they've just all ran right down at the boss. I don't know if Wolf Disco's like shifting power actually hit Dealer from up here. Maybe it did, but Fired Up just got right up close and personal next to the boss to make that AoE hit Dealer.
Well, I don't know, but if you look at the damage differential,
it's
you
basically
do see
the same.
Look at Ryson's damage from Perplexed. He's actually doing so much more damage than JB from Golden Guardians, and that's honestly the reason that Dealer's Ixa is going to die within moments for both of these two teams. A Shine dropped super low there at the end, but everything is fine.
Yeah, they are all right. He does need to land a heal, does eventually get it. That debuff does continue to tick after the boss dies, and both teams now swimming through the air on their mounts, thanks to that Bwansamdi magic. Carrying them back here, and this is going to be a nice run back here, where both teams actually, it's important to save as much time as you can during this, and there's a little bit of a slow fall segment up ahead that landing that perfectly and quickly can be a huge time save factor as well. As you can see the beautiful frog forms on the side of Perplexed from their Night Fade players in Soul Shape versus I mean, that's one of the sillier Soul Shapes for sure. Everybody now mounting up. Looks like Wolf Disco has been casting those slow falls on everybody as well, and looks like the Mask is in a pretty favorable position here where they won't have to do too much work to skip it. The entire team getting onto this little spot, and everybody is going to go on their jumps now with the slow fall and land all the way onto that platform. So are the Golden Guardians. Are the Golden Guardians also getting down to this platform?
Oh, Divine Fell!
No.
Divine Fell!
No. Oh, the life group!
So sick.
And a beautiful tragedy. A run-saving life grip there, and this is a strategic difference now between the two teams. Perplexed, Divine is going to pull these two Warlords to the side, and he is the only player in combat with those two mobs, whereas the rest of Perplexed is pulling the other 5 mobs. Now Divine is going to hit his Shadow Meld button, and so they've dropped combat with the 2 Risen Warlords, but the other 5 mobs, they are still in combat with, and those will be joining this pull with them now. So they are going to do this section in fewer pulls than the Golden Guardians, because they are pulling this right into the Dental Drill, and once that Dental Drill's first Haywire cast goes off, they are going to be going into the rest of it as well. Here's that Haywire cast, and they have had enough of being near that thing. They are getting into all the rest of the trash here, and this is the crucial moment in the dungeon. Once all this trash dies, the 60% trash is going to be spawning, actually for both teams, once they finish this next little bit of trash. That 60% Pride is game-breaking if it does not get skipped successfully.
A little bit interesting of an adaptation from what we saw from Perplexed the other time. Wolf Disco getting bop there on the Arf Woof cast so that he can press his CDs whenever he needs to. And so before, he actually got stunned during his combustion. He's actually not even combusting this pack this time, so a little bit change of cooldowns from Perplexed. I wonder why.
Yeah, they are going to be okay, though. It looks like they're working now on this ARF, and once this dies, they're going to need to land a swift Mass Dispel into everybody hitting their movement abilities and Invis pots in a very short frame. Let's see how that works out. They need to kill that explosive. There, they've done it. There goes the Mass Dispel. Beautifully timed. Everybody now hitting their Invis pots. It looks like a Dental Drill was in combat with somebody, but they maybe Invis it off, or maybe it was just running in a weird way. Something strange certainly afoot there for Perplexed, but the skip has been executed successfully and beautifully. So have the Golden Guardians. The Golden Guardians also have made their way through. They are going to be fighting these double lubricators, whereas Perplexed are taking a single lubricator into the 3 essential oils up here.
I think our cooldown tracker isn't working properly, because Perplexed would definitely have their Bloodlust on cooldown by this point. I think that there's
you might be right
something
as well.
afoot. Yeah, I think there's something afoot with the cooldown tracker. Maybe that'll be fixed soon. I'm sure it'll just like randomly fix itself. But Golden Guardians and Perplexed basically at the same point in this dungeon. Golden Guardians do have a little bit more count here. Once these essential oils do end up dying for Perplexed, they are still a little bit behind. 2% enemy forces behind where the Golden Guardians are. So this is looking good for GG.
Yeah, Golden Guardians getting ready now to pull the Mana Storms here, and they have a little bit of... they actually don't have damage on pull here. Perplexed will have a little bit of damage on pull, potentially, which is useful. There's the Ashen Hallow coming out from Rice, and JP needs to wait a tiny bit before he'll get access to that, but they should still get a cast during the fight, so it shouldn't actually make a difference between these two teams. As you can see now, there's the Ashen Hallow coming out from JB, and both Paladins will be ascending on the meters. Ryson hitting that 12k mark. JB rising also as the damage is starting to come out now that he's pressed those cooldowns. A lot of damage does need to be healed on this boss fight as well. It is a pretty dangerous boss fight, particularly if you have to move and that beam hits the boss, or if it hits a player who's already low on health. And they need to also save some defensives here for this, the Shadow Fury stun that they need to land in a few seconds. So very important to see how they manage that.
Ryson is slaying right now. Ryson and Swag are both doing insane amount of damage compared to their Golden Guardians counterparts. And you can see that reflected in Millhouse Mana Storm's health. Millhouse Mana Storm for Perplexed at 27%, where Golden Guardians is at 34 right now.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it can be explained by just who had cooldowns on pull versus who was holding them, or not holding them, but waiting for them to show back up based on when they'd used them most recently the last time. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, that's something that is going to work a little bit in Perplexed advantage. Yeah, I mean, looking at the boss right now, they are ahead in terms of boss time. Their Millhouse is lower, their Maleficence is lower. This is good news for Perplexed, and their cooldown should be back up a little bit sooner as well, though it looks like a combustion has just finished there for Wolf Disco, whereas for Fired Up, it might be in his near future. Yeah, there it goes, it looks like maybe. Yeah, so that should even up things on the Maleficent front at least. Oh, actually, they're going back into Millhouse now. Millhouse rejoining the fray for both teams. So once they push Millhouse to 10%, they will go into another Maleficent phase without the help of Millhouse's stuns.
And something that's important to note is that both teams need to make sure that they skip that 60% Pride on their way out. We've seen teams accidentally body pull that a couple times this weekend, and that would be an absolute tragedy if that happened in this matchup here. Both teams getting Millhouse down to that 10% mark, like you said. Now Perplexed, 10% ahead on Maleficent. This is going to be just a matter of a couple of seconds difference between these two teams at killing the final boss. But again, 66 to 68% enemy forces. Do you have a favorite here, Dratnos? Do you think that 2% enemy forces actually makes a difference, or not really?
I think it ends up being roughly the same between these two teams, but a thing worth noting is that Perplexed is going to have to deal with those Risen Warlords. They're going to have to like slow fall and jump off the side when they come out of the Mechagon wing, whereas Golden Guardians aren't going to have to waste time setting something like that up. Here comes that crucial moment, though. Perplexed killing that boss sooner, and now they're going to have to run out and hug left. They're going to pull all of these little mobs over on the side, but as long as they don't get the Pride mob, everything is fine.
They notably also don't have the Dental Drill. Exactly.
Yeah, whereas Golden Guardians have to skip it. Golden Guardians still have that Dental Drill unpulled that they do need to skip, and it looks like it's going to be Yoda pulling it and eventually Shadow Melding it is the way that they don't lose too much time to that skip. So both teams now kind of maneuvering their way out of the Mechagon wing. They have both skipped the Pride, and that was the most important thing, as Wolf Disco nearly goes sailing off the edge there. Barely saved in time. And they are getting onto this Enraged Spirit. Beautiful position of the Enraged Spirit right next to that Night Faerun, which which means they'll get to open that thing and stun it, prevent it from doing too much nonsense. Whereas for Golden Guardians, it is much further up there. They'll be pulling it. They have to kind of wait for it to run back into range, though. It's not too much of a time loss here for them, but it is a little bit. You can see Yoda kind of having to kite there and not getting that auto attack damage in along the way, not getting to use too many of his offensive abilities. Fired Up now opening that urn, and they are going to be working on their Enraged Spirit, whereas Perplexed running through now. They will be skipping this trash pull for now. Divine pulling to the side, and will Shadow Meld in a bit to get past there. Wolf Disco also getting combat, is going to use the Invis ability to drop out of that as well, and they'll be moving into their car wing maybe 20 or 30 seconds ahead of the Golden Guardians.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to note that whenever we saw Perplexed run this dungeon earlier versus Golden Guardians, they actually played that Enraged Spirit without the urn. So this time they decided to play it with the urn just because of where it was. They're like, oh, may as well use it here. Because it had such a bad pat last time, it just didn't make too much sense. But now Perplexed, getting ready to use the urn on this absolutely massive pull. They need to make sure that all of these mobs die within the 10-second stun, because those Hoodoo Hexers do a healing wave cast that will heal up all the mobs. The High Priests also have a heal, a little bit less important, but still slightly important nonetheless. And now the clock is ticking for them. They need to have everything dead out of this stun. They don't have the Sigil of Silence. We did see Divine use that to group up the mobs a little bit, and now everything, they have a couple rotational kicks that they can go through. Lightning discharges going off from those Hoodoo Hexers like you see from the side of Perplex, but it looks like this pack is going to be falling here and just be fine for them.
Divine took a lot of damage there, was under a lot of pressure, but it looks like he's going to be okay. Receives the lay on hands as well from Ryson to top him back out of danger. Still, I think, has a cheat death trinket available as well if needed. And so they should be all right. There's the 80% pride spawning for them, but look at what Golden Guardians have done.
Both sides.
Look at what Fired Up has done here. Fired Up once again has just set fire to the entire world and is starting now both teams on this manifestation at the exact same time. This is going to be a race to the finish, as Golden Guardians actually have an Adelaide Deathwalker coming in on top to get Cleaves down, whereas Perplexed do not have that. So that will be something that adds a little bit more time in favor of Perplexed. But it's all really going to be about the Hekar and Wezala boss encounters. That is going to be the crucial determining factor between these two teams. There's so much time that can be made up or lost on these fights. Hekar in particular, whether you can skip that second and third Blood Barrier cast, or whether you end up running into them. Let's see whether Perplexed is able to do it. They have that Pride buff. They have their Bloodlust. They are getting into the boss right now. Looks like they are going to fire off the Ashen Hallow and the Bloodlust. Everything right on pull. They are not going to try and delay any of the casts here. On the side of Golden Guardians, they aren't pushing all of their damage buttons yet. They are going to wait for that first Blood Barrier cast, which is time-based, and then they'll be using some cooldowns. So starting now, they're going to use some cooldowns, and because the mobs, the ads come in at % health-based times, it can be a little bit beneficial to delay the damage burst so that there are fewer of those ads up during that first Blood Barrier cast. Looks like there will be one ad getting hit by that on the side of Golden Guardians. Both teams now making short work of a car, but nobody can stand up to what Perplexed has done to this boss. It is almost dead already. It will not be getting another Blood Barrier cast. Golden Guardians, though, also really accelerating here. The boss melting for them, too. Even on this +20 tyrannical level, it looks like they'll be able to skip their second cast of the Blood Barrier as well, with many seconds to spare. So they'll be making their way back towards the front now. Also, let's take a look at the count here, because it looks like Perplexed, with that 2% extra count that they need, they need to fight these mobs. Golden Guardians do not need to do that.
Ah, man, that pack, that's a time loss for like almost no reason. That feels really bad to play that, I must say. Even though they just have to kill off the Devoured ads, that High Priest will eventually make its way into this pack. That's still just a little bit of a... It's a little bit of an inefficiency that they could have made up somewhere else, it feels like. But maybe with their route, there's only so much that they can really do. And they had to cut something, and it has to be that pack where they're just going to play those 4 mobs or whatever by themselves like that.
Yeah, it's definitely something that has really equalized these two teams. They are both now working on the exact same trash pull here. There's that High Priest filtering into the pull for Perplexed as well. That's going to be one of the highest HP mobs here because it came from so far away, whereas Golden Guardians have no such High Priest involved in their pull. And once they finish off these last two tiny HP mobs, they can go right into boss, and they'll be pulling Moisala ahead of where Perplexed are, but only by 2 seconds. Yeah, this is going to be such a close boss race between these two teams at this point. Once that High Priest goes down, the two teams will have the exact same set of things remaining alive for them. I'd have to give the slight edge, though, to Golden Guardians. They did pull the boss first. They have so much damage, and they didn't have to deal with this High Priest that Perplexed is still needing to worry about. They're still needing to kick, and they are still needing to cleave down. Look at that thing casting heal over there. Somebody's going to need to interrupt it, and they do interrupt it. But it just keeps running away once it's low on health. It never stops running, and so you keep having to... There's a Death Grip, and now Shine having to use a global on Chains of Ice on it as well, and they keep using stuff on that High Priest. That's going to be damage they aren't putting into Moisala, and Golden Guardians is.
But even still, Moisala hits 98% for Perplexed before it hits 98% for the Golden Guardians, Dratnos, even though they were playing Ring Around the Rosie with that High Priest. That was kind of weird.
It's a mystery, yeah. I mean, they are somehow squeezing out a little bit more damage here. Let's see how things shake out, though, as everybody is now going to be adventuring to their platforms. All 4 of these ads need to get killed here, every single one, or else they will certainly lose this game. There's Fired Up. You can see dodging that Enraged Spirit, still patrolling on his platform, firing off the Combust into that ad. Divine and Ryson working together to take down an ad as well for Perplex. That's usually how you do it. Tank and healer to go to 1, and each of your DPS players goes to the remaining 3.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes some of the classes don't have the easiest time at being able to finish off these ads, so you have to make sure that you do commit a lot of cooldowns. However, Holy Paladin plus Vengeance Demon Hunter is not one of those setups that does have a hard time. Divine is able to actually get that trash pack pulled a little bit early. That also ensures, because he is on that platform, it ensures the rest of his party will be grouped up there.
And somehow Moisala is on the different platform for Golden Guardians. It is
that
not
is so
on
bad.
the platform
that
with
so
all the
bad.
trash. How has this happened? I actually don't know what causes it to choose the different platforms that it will go and occupy, but this is a disaster for Golden Guardians because look at Perplexed. Even though this is so scary for them, they can get all this count now with this huge haste buff as well. They're doing huge AoE damage to this pull, whereas Golden Guardians are just having to fight the boss by itself.
If Yoda and JB are late to kill their ad, then Yoda's not going to be able to get down to his platform in time and secure. It will teleport you to the platform if your tank is already there, and you can secure which platform it's going to teleport you to if your tank is already present on that platform. But yeah, like you said, that is very, very unfortunate for the Golden Guardians because now they don't have that trash. They weren't able to cleave it down with that haste buff, and that's going to be it. It's just one minor mistake for the Golden Guardians, and Perplexed is just able to continuously cleave down all their trash. It would take, basically, from here, a Divine Death would be the only thing that would allow Golden Guardians to come back.
And Divine has 1 or maybe 2 cheat deaths that will stand between him and death. Although, look at how much damage that is dealing to him, all of this stuff. But they've dealt with all the trash. They just need to kill these last 2 mobs from the very front of the dungeon and the boss. Boss at 12%, but there is Last Resort for Divine. He is taking a lot of damage. There's the Blessing of Sacrifice coming out from Ryson to try and prevent him from dying. A beautiful demon coming in from the Twisting Nether. And that is going to be something that they can kill now for a little bit more count. Golden Guardians need to kill all this trash, including the ones at the top of the stairs, before Perplexed kill these 2 trash mobs and the last 1% of Moisala. I don't think it's realistic. There's just too much there. Moisala goes down. 2 trash mobs need to die for Perplexed, and that's all that there is left in this dungeon, whereas Golden Guardians, all this trash, they should have done it with the boss. They weren't able to. Perplexed stop the timer, take the win, and make their way up to the the global finals, the grand finals against Echo. 2-0 against Golden Guardians.
Perplexed taking that victory there. And yeah, we got to be able to figure out if there is any sort of way to see where you could bait Moisala's other spawn. That was super weird. I don't know if it's based off who the first person is to kill an ad or something like that, but that's not something I've really ever seen in the past.